Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining me today. We are once again working on the big, mean, lime green Ford Escape in the shop today, and we're once again on the interior of the car. Today we are tackling a power steering issue that's common to the Ford Escape and Mariners in the 2008 to 2012 era. It's got to do with the electronic power steering. Customer complaint today is that she had an intermittent loss of power steering. There was no power steering on this thing at all, and it's typically tied to what's called the power steering torque sensor. If we go ahead and pull up the power steering control module here on the scan tool, you'll see that we're already recognizing a fault in here, a B2278 steering shaft torque sensor fault. Now, for once, there's really not going to be a lot of diagnosis with this, honestly. And chances are, if you're in this video watching it anyway, you're here for replacement. So there is a TSB tied directly to this thing. It's got a TSB number 14-0016. Step 1 of the service procedure, does the trouble code B2278 pop up? The answer here is yes. So if yes, proceed to step 2 and replace the torque sensor. There's the part number there, a CL8Z3F818-A, and our labor time on here should take about 1.6 hours. Now, I do want to caution you guys on something. If you're looking to be doing this job yourself, you can very easily wreck the torque sensor on installation if you're not careful, okay? This sensor has to be installed it's critical how it's installed. You'll see there's a little, well, let's unwrap it here. There's a little pin in here, and just like on a timing chain tensioner, when you pull the pin, there's really no going back here. This pin is intended to keep the inner and outer pieces together. If you pull this pin out and it's not properly aligned, and you apply power to the power steering module on here, it can take this steering wheel and rip it all the way to one of the locks, left or right. That power steering module has a ton of torque. If your hands are accidentally near that steering wheel and get caught and that happens, somebody could get hurt. So we're going to take a lot of precautions making sure that the sensor's installed right, because worst case scenario, if you do it wrong, you wreck the sensor. Or sorry, best case scenario, if you do it wrong, you wreck the sensor. Worst case, somebody gets hurt. So we're going to show you guys the steps to replace this and be confident in that replacement. Now, like I said, we're not going to really be doing any testing. If we look at a wiring diagram just really quick today, you'll see the power steering control module is listed as an assembly here. And that's the way it used to get serviced when you had trouble with the electronic power steering. This entire assembly here only is showing power, ground, and network communication going to it. It's not showing the individual sensor inputs to test or replace. So from the factory, this thing wasn't intended to be serviced. They had issues with it. They've made it serviceable. I wish they would do it on the F-150s as well, but hey, maybe we'll get there someday. All right, now, what do we have to do? First things first, because we have to pull the entire column assembly out, we've removed the driver's seat for ease of filming. 2 guys, 1 Ford Escape. There's not a lot of room in here to get good shots for you guys to be able to follow along with us. Now, if you're doing this at home, you don't have to remove the driver's seat. You can get this entire job done with the driver's seat in place, but we've pulled that out to get it out of the way. Now we need to disconnect the battery. You don't want to be pulling this column assembly, which includes the airbag, off with the battery powered up. So key out of the ignition. I'll get the battery disconnected and we'll get right after it. Now you want to make sure that when you do disconnect the battery that you isolate those cables away from the battery itself to make sure they don't flop back onto the battery, energize, and engage that power steering control motor, that assembly under here, when you're not ready, okay? We want to make sure that when we energize this system, when we decide to apply power to it, that everything is perfect. All right, first step, we're going to get this shroud off around the steering wheel. Actually, we'll get this knee bolster off first. This is just plastic clips up near the top here. And then towards the bottom, there's 2 little hinged pieces here. So that comes off. Looks like we got 4 10mm bolts holding this metal knee bolster on. Nice little piece of custom-made foam right there. And if we can get a shot in here, you'll see this is our power steering motor assembly. Let me grab you guys a flashlight. So right here is our power steering motor assembly. Our sensor, this yellow wire right here, is actually the connector for our sensor. So here's what we're getting to, which we'll pull all this apart. So we got, what do we got here? Looks like 5.5. Yep, 5.5 millimeter on the steering shroud screws or bolts. And then there's just some clips that kind of hold this shroud assembly together. And of course, the right side doesn't want to release. There's 1 and 2. All right, we'll set those to the side. And now we have to come over here and start to disconnect the electrical connectors off of the steering column. So all of these connectors, ignition switch, airbag, clock spring, all of that, will leave the harness in the vehicle and we'll remove the entire column with the wiring all removed. Now we should, if everything goes right here, we should be able to get this done and not have to pull this airbag off, because you know, it's so much fun taking the horn pad off of these. If you watch the other video and watch me struggle a little bit on it, it was a ton of fun. Tool like this really helps for getting these pins out. There we go. And what do we got? We got one more here. There we go. So our harness, we'll just kind of route it down underneath the dash here, keep it out of our way so we're not messing with it. And now our steering column is electronically all disconnected. Now we got two big bolts here that are Torx. We'll see what size that is here in a second. And what we're gonna do, we're gonna remove these two bolts. That will loosen this steering column assembly. And now what that'll cause this entire thing to be able to drop down. So we do have to support it while we're unbolting it. I'm gonna lock the column in right now. Okay, so we got a T47 Torx. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe it's a T45, my bad. I thought T47 sounded kind of strange. Let's try that again. So we got a T45 Torx. Remove one. And again, use one hand to support the wheel at this point, because you'll see here, everything's loose now. And we should be able to just pull this off. Now you want to be careful. I forgot to do one step here. Actually, we'll back up here a second, and I want to thread one of these guys back in quick to hold this in place, because I want to make sure we don't wreck our clock spring on here. All right, we'll let that hang there. So the issue is when we pull this column off, if you were to turn the steering wheel separate of the column assembly, you could wreck the clock spring. Now there's bungee cords you could use, really anything that's gonna isolate or connect the steering wheel to the column. Now a little motion back and forth like this, not the end of the world. What we're trying to do is keep it from going a full revolution. So I'm gonna bungee cord around the backside. I'm just gonna come through the front of the wheel like this, trying not to push on the steering wheel control buttons, and hopefully not hit myself in the face with this bungee cord either. It's a little short. Where can I go? Sorry, putting my head in the camera. We don't want to put a lot of pressure on these buttons. I don't want to wreck them. Okay, so now our wheel can still turn a little bit, but it's not going to turn all the way around. Get our scan tool out of the way. Now, back to the task at hand. Pulling this bolt back out, again, supporting the wheel. And with a nice gentle tug, we'll pull this thing right off of the steering shaft assembly. Like so. Now, you don't have to be too careful with this, you know, making sure it's aligned perfectly, because one of the teeth here, or one of the splines, is larger than the others, making sure it can really only go back on in one place. So you don't have to worry too much about that. We'll set this aside. Remember, this does have an airbag in it. So just keep that in mind wherever you're setting that. That does have an airbag inside. Now, we've got our shaft here that's held on by a snap ring there. So snap ring pliers to remove that. I think this is going to be too small. So we'll get in here with a snap ring pliers, we'll pinch it together, hopefully not send it flying. Woo! That's a big snap ring. All right, put that out of the way. Now this guy should basically fall right off. Set that up there. And there is our sensor that we're going after. Okay, so don't go undoing this sensor yet. We don't want to be popping this sensor out until we have this steering shaft perfectly lined up. That's what this black plastic piece is that comes with the new sensor. This is the alignment tool, and we want to make sure that our steering gear itself is aligned properly. So pop out this this little gasket right here that's around the wiring of the sensor. Don't forget to put this back in. And then we'll install this tool, and this flat should fit in the flat of the assembly. It should slide right down over the shaft, and it's not. Even though our steering wheel was perfectly straight and level when we removed everything, that's not the case right now. It's not lined up perfectly. So what we want to do now, and that's why I have the front of the vehicle up in the air right now, is I want to bump the tires to get this thing to line up perfectly. When we get this tool lined up, we should end up seeing a small hole right in this little window right here. There should be a hole, and that hole right there is where this pin is installed into on the brand new sensor. So let me kick the tires a little bit and get this thing lined up. So I'm just going to take the tire and move it very, very slowly, small, tiny amounts. This is where it helps to have somebody in the car watching.
Pass again, a little bit more. Little, like a real small. There you go, perfect.
Okay, so all I did was tap the tire and I was able to get that thing lined up. And now, if everything is right, we should be able to put this alignment tool on. It should fit over the shaft of the steering, and it should fit in this groove. It should sit flush on here. It should have a little bit of play in there, which is good. We don't want it binding at all. There's a little room for variance in here, but not a lot. So a little bit of play in there. So we are lined up with our circle or our hole in the window. The tool fits on there. We're ready to pop the old sensor out. Let's start with the electrical connector down here on the gear assembly. That's going to travel under. And there's a locking tab on there, because of course there is. So the original sensor's got a little blue locking tab on it. Or, sorry, the original sensor connector. All right, now that's all unplugged. We should be able to very carefully take a pick kind of behind the sensor, just start working it working it outwards. Feel kind of bad. I haven't referenced the instruction sheet yet at all. Grab another pick. 2 picks are probably better than 1 for this. We're going to try to wiggle it out. There it goes. All right. So there's our old sensor. I don't know if it's easier to see now maybe, but you can see that little, focus. You can see that little hole right in the window there. That's what we're shooting for with the new one. Nothing really to worry about cleaning up inside of here. The grease looks really good. So time to pop the new one in. Should sit nice and tight against there. It'll actually kind of like stop itself. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is there's a little, see a little arrow right here? That's just supposed to line up with the slot in the shaft, this little arrow. Not exactly the most intricate of designs, but arrow, shaft.
Let me see if I can zoom in on that one.
Right there. Arrow and shaft should line up. Our pin is still inside. Oh, I accidentally almost just pulled it out. We'll leave that pin inside of there until we're set on this thing's position. All right, let's see if our tool fits back over. Tool still fits. That's good. Get our connector back in place, our harness routed back to where it needs to be. Don't forget the blue locking tab on there, lock that down. Now our tool, we know the sensor's in all the way because our tool is once again flush on the face here. So that's good. Everything looks good there. Now, because I don't want to second guess myself, time to whip out the instruction manual from Ford quick and just make sure that we're not missing anything here prior to pulling that pin. Because once you pull the pin, Mr. Steering Sensor is no longer your friend, just like a timing chain tensioner. So it says to install the alignment tool, make sure that's good, press down on the tool to seat the sensor. So I guess they want you to actually use the tool to seat the sensor on there. I don't know, I think my fingers kind of worked okay for that. Pull the pin and discard, remove the alignment tool, install the clip, install the sensor, and reinstall everything. So nothing too special there. You know, we went through the alignment procedure prior to removing the old sensor, so we should be good here. Pull our pin. And you can see the little circle hole there, just to the left side of the window. Let's go ahead and get our steering. Before we do that, we gotta get the grommet back on, right? Almost forgot it. That's never happened before, right? Oh, we gotta make sure we get it the right direction. Making it look like a fool because I don't remember how it went on. Like so. So the cut piece here goes to the top, fits into there, and really it's just to, you know, keep any dust and debris out of there. Now we can put this guy back on, make sure it's sitting flush, and hopefully we won't send our snap ring flying. A bigger snap ring pliers would definitely be handy for this job, if you have one. Just like so. Now that gets that set back in there. Now we can reinstall the column. Now, according to the instructions on here, when we're installing this, the steering wheel should be at the 11 o'clock position, and this is normal for this vehicle or for this installation. So I'm going to actually pull my bungee cord off here, make it a little bit easier. We'll have the column assembly where it needs to be, and we'll move the steering wheel to roughly the 11 o'clock position, and it should slide right in. If you have to force it, something is wrong, okay? It should slip in there nicely. Again, it should only go on in one spot. Now we'll get our bolts started. Let's see if they give us a torque value in the instructions here. "28 Newton meters. All right, get this guy out of the way. And now I'm just going to go ahead and unplug all the electrical connectors back into the column. Nothing too crazy here. Just make sure you route them in the exact location they were before. And make sure the Christmas tree pins are all in their proper spots. Make sure the wiring doesn't get pinched or anything when we put the shroud back on later. So now that's all plugged back in. We should be ready to go ahead and flip our key on here and test this thing out. Before we bother putting the rest of the shrouds on, I always like to make sure that we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and hook the battery back up. Okay, moment of truth time. Now, if we did everything right, we should put the key in here and the wheel shouldn't do anything wild. Now, if I did something wrong, you should stop watching the video now. Just kidding. Let's see what happens. Do not do one of these and install the key, okay? This motor's got a ton of torque. I don't want anybody breaking a wrist or anything like that. So here we go. You know, why is the default volume blowing your eardrums out? I don't get it.
Ford likes to party.
Thanks for the commentary from the back. Ford likes to party. All right, let's fire this thing up and see if we've got power steering. Whoa, that's nice. So it turns. Again, I'm not looping any fingers through this wheel because I don't trust it at this point. So we'll shut that off. Airbag light is on. Everybody's plugged in. Hopefully something's not broken. Well, that's fun. Let's figure out what we got in there for codes. It's fully seated. Everybody's plugged back in where they belong. Let's see what we've... Oh. All right, let's... You know, I'm curious about that airbag. Let's start there. So we'll get into the RCM, restraint control module. Oh, horn works. Clock spring's working. At least for the horn switch. The
driver's seat's out of the car. Whoops.
Yeah, that'll do it. Again, we pull the driver's seat out because yeah, there's not a lot of room in here. Okay, let's do a relearn quick since we got the scan tool hooked up. Anyway, let's go ahead back into our power steering control module and let's learn the 0 position of this sensor. We'll clear the codes first. Actually, let's make sure there's no other codes in there first. All right, still just our 2278. That's pretty much a history code at this point. We'll clear that out. Good to go. We'll verify that it's actually out. Beautiful. And we'll go into our special functions, and we are going to go into steering wheel position sensor calibration. Before performing this procedure, blah, 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 blah. Actually, no, let's go to trim once and see what that does. Is used to set the torque and position for the steering sensor after replacing the torque sensor. So we're going to go to trim, not sensor calibration. We're going to do the trim. And actually, let's see if it mentions that in here. Connect the terminal, hybrid vehicle, blah, blah, blah. Calibration procedure. See general procedures. Okay, so they're not telling us in the instructions, but we went to steering torque sensor trim, and that's telling us that we want to do this or do this following replacement. Do you want to continue? Yes. Ensure that the vehicle conditions are met. Stationary steering wheel straight ahead position. Do not touch the steering wheel during this procedure. Now, I'm going to have to stick my head in here and make sure this looks good. I think that looks like a pretty straight steering wheel. We'll go ahead and push OK. Ignition on, yes. It's been success. Turn ignition off, cool. Start the engine. Okay. Verify that the steering resistance is balanced. Rotate clockwise and counterclockwise, and verify that the effort required in each direction is equal. Again, I'm not sticking any fingers in the steering wheel yet. That feels pretty good. That feels pretty good. But again, front end's in the air on here still. Let me drop the front end down and get this thing actually requiring some torque. Going for a ride. Brrr. Okay, now that we actually have some torque required for this, that's feeling like power steering is doing its job. That's feeling good as well. Back to center. Is steering resistance equal? Yes. Turn off the ignition. Okay. It is now complete. Well, let's go back here. Now, oh, it's green. Green is good. Let's go into the ABS module. I want to show you guys just some quick data in here. Now, I know I didn't show this in the beginning of the video, but I want to show it now just because I want you guys to see there is steering angle data within here. And we'll see here. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was in the beginning. Right now we're at 439 degrees. Okay. Codes, well, besides the fact that the driver's seat is obviously unplugged on here, we'll have to get that put back in. Guys, I'm not going to bother showing you how to put the bottom panel back on. You know, this metal panel, it's 4 10mm bolts. Pop your plastics back together, secure them back down. Really not too concerned about torque specs on those things. Just snug. You know, don't go hammering them with the impact. But this thing is fixed up. B2278 TSB for replacement of the steering torque sensor to give us power steering back on this mean green, lime green Escape. I think that's going to do it for today. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, please smash the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you have questions, comments, concerns, drop them down in the comment section below. We'll make sure to get back to you there. Until then, guys, thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy wrenching, everyone. Thank you.